When I think about beauty and identity, it goes beyond what I look like externally. But for thousands of women, our external features and body size impacts how we show up for ourselves and impacts most of all our confidence. That's why I felt it was important to talk about nutrition and how we eat plays a role in how we feel and how we look. In today's episode of Your Deep Life for Christian Women, I am talking with Juliana Leamen, a board certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and CEO of Naturally Joyous. Juliana has a master's degree in science and is certified as a
Mhm.
functional genomics practitioner as well as trained in human behavior at the DeMartini Institute. She created the release method to help women in their 50s and 60s release weight and keep it off through functional DNA testing and behavioral change that's tailored to their body's unique needs. Juliana is the published author of Release, A Woman's Guide to Release Weight in Midlife Through Becoming Your Body's Best Friend. And she is the host of the podcast Confidence Within, where I was recently a guest, and I encourage you to check out my interview entitled Increasing Resilience in Midlife. Hello and welcome, Juliana. It's great to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. I am just so honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, always, always. We have a long-lasting friendship relationship that goes back a few years. And
Yes.
just to give some context behind how we met, I desperately was struggling with menopause and didn't understand what was going on with my body, why I was struggling to release weight. And a friend of mine, a mutual friend actually,
Yes.
introduced me to Juliana and I joined her release method program. And I'm telling you, what I thought was just going to be about my body became so much more. And it really did shift the mindsets for me that was helped me to understand why I was doing what I was doing. And it's also helped me to come to terms with my body and what was going on. And I would encourage anyone to check out Juliana's website, and the information will be in the description of this particular recording, this particular podcast. So, Juliana, thank you for all that you have done in my life. I am so
Oh.
grateful. But my question to you is, what does identity, beauty, and faith mean to you?
And it's interesting because I'm in a industry that there's so much focus, right, on how we look, how we are perceived, and also I think my background being born and raised in Brazil, even
Mm,
though I have been in Canada for the last 20 years, plays a role in my answer as well because of the extreme focus that there is on beauty and, physical looks, right?
yes.
Um, for me, I think identity is, and I think that answer probably will shift, with time, but it's
Mm,
very much how I see myself in relation to, sort of subjective points outside of myself. And how I identify within my family is going to be different than in my career, than with my friends, and so on. So I think it's like this little bit of like perspective between how I perceive how I look, what I do, versus what I think is expected of me in different
mm,
scenarios, right? So that's how I see identity. When it comes to beauty for me, I think this is the part that I'm different than a lot of people in the weight loss space because I see beauty truly as who people are inside. It's like
mm,
seeing their heart, right? And I say even this in the context of like you're watching a movie and somebody's portrayed as a villain. And
mm,
then halfway through the movie, so you're designed to not like the person, right? And then halfway through the movie, you get their backstory. And for me, it's almost like my heart burst with compassion. And it's like,
Oh,
oh my gosh. And you see the person. And I find that incredibly beautiful when we get to see each other's true humanity.
mm,
And faith for me, I would say, is, knowing that there's something bigger outside of us that is really there for us, taking care of us and guiding us, and being really grateful for all the little crumbs that we see along the way, to guide us to the next thing and the next
yes,
thing. But it's also about living in this state of gratitude that even
yes,
difficult moments are there helping us. It's for our benefit. And I truly live my life from that point of view.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is why we are so connected, Juliana, because we have such the
Mhm.
same perspective about faith and about beauty and about identity. We'd show up in different ways. How do you balance that though? How do you balance the your identity in
Yeah.
all these different spaces and still
Yeah.
maintain authenticity at the same time?
Yeah, the way that I even describe that, like in my work, because I do a lot of work with self-worth as well
Mhm.
in the field that I am, I like to think of us as like we're like all these little fragments, you know?
Mm.
So if you were to be the most authentic version of you, we're like this mosaic. So I usually think of this like butterfly mosaic, right?
Mm.
And we're all these little fragments. So we're all those pieces anyways at all times. But in some situations, we highlight some pieces because we feel that's how I'm going to feel accepted or safer. In other places, different pieces of your mosaic are a little bit more welcome. So it's not so much about, not being authentic, but it's, I think, more even subconsciously like presenting the aspects of us that are more helpful or congruent with the situation.
Situation, yeah.
Whereas the big picture is how can I feel comfortable in every situation showing all of my mosaic pieces, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of the whole work with authenticity long term. Yeah.
I love how you talk about the butterfly being the mosaic. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful metaphor. Okay, so what were some of your early challenges with identity as a young person, your younger self growing up, right? And how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah. I'll say my biggest one, because I was kind of reflecting on that.
Mm,
And I think I even mentioned that briefly in my book. It was very much my early 20s. So maybe not as young as you think, but that was the meaningful one. And this is when I moved countries, right?
mm,
And the reason why this is was so significant for me is that the beauty standards that I worked my whole life towards literally changed overnight when I moved. Because what was beautiful in Brazil was not beautiful in Canada, nor attainable because of weather and
yeah,
expectations.
yeah.
And that was so shocking to me because it showed to me how subjective and relative even things such as beauty really is.
Mm. And I
Hmm.
know that you had some health issues, right?
Yes.
Which
Yes.
caused you to have to change your diet drastically. Can you
Hmm.
share that with us today?
Yeah, of course. So I'd say like the primary health issue, at least that's how it began, was really through chronic pain. So I
Mm,
was in a state of chronic migraines, like several per week. And this went on for about 15 years. So this is like a long, long
wow.
time. And through a lot of that trial and error, going through literally so many doctors and practitioners, and nothing really was working for me. I was put on so many different medications, and one of those in particular really, and now I know from through genetics why, but regardless, it really took me from being a size 4 most of my life without too much effort. And I went up to like a size 12, 14,
Mm,
like in
yeah,
months. Like it was
yeah,
fast.
yeah.
So I didn't even have the one sort of time to catch up to what was going on. And two, again, like I mentioned, I was born and raised in a country with a lot of emphasis on it. And I
Mm,
received a lot of comments from friends and family members about my weight,
mm,
even well-meaning, but incredibly hurtful, right?
yeah.
And I had never experienced that before. And it was shocking to me. And I thought, wow, this is what women experience all day long, right? Because, I was doing what I could. Even then, I was somewhat trying to be healthy, but there's
Mm,
other circumstances that nobody knew behind the scenes causing, after I stopped the medication, the weight did not go away.
mm,
And even with everything I done after, shortly after medication. It took me a few years to actually regain true control of my metabolism. So that was kind of like the core of the health
Yeah,
struggles,
yeah.
which eventually led to a few other different ones, but that was like the primary one that I dealt with.
Wow. I really can identify with the fact that people can be so insensitive around, they have no awareness of what's happening in a person's life. They just
Yeah,
see the drastic change and they think it's maybe out of your negligence or not caring about yourself, right?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
they just think, oh, she's probably eating too much or she's not taking care of her body. And the emotional impact of their words, people just don't understand how, when you're already dealing with a traumatic situation that you're going through, like a health problem,
yeah,
how the words that we say can impact the emotions even more, which then causes more stress, right? Because
yeah,
you're already consciously aware of your body has changed. And I'm trying to manage this while I navigate through this process of whatever physically or scientifically is going on with my body. Um,
yeah.
wow, I can't even
Hmm.
imagine what that was doing to you mentally at that time when you were going through all of that.
Yeah.
Um, but you work with women now, helping them around mindsets, right?
Hmm.
And helping them to overcome their mindset, because I know that because you did that very well with me. Um, what are some of the emotional blockages that women that causes us not to lose weight?
Hmm. I would say like the main one is that, and that's why, I titled my book Becoming Your Body's Best Friend,
Hmm.
is to thinking that because we have a weight issue or whatever the chronic health issues, right, that we're dealing with, that it is a form of either personal failure or the body is broken or something is wrong with me. So that is the primary one that we see because I think it's kind of like the top level mindset block that most people encounter at
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
And the problem with that concept is that we misunderstand the perfection of our bodies, right? I much rather think of the body as it is literally doing everything it can, but we may have to find and remove the interference in between what your body can do versus maybe your lifestyle or something else, like in my case, hidden behind the scenes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it is an emotional interference, right? Because of trauma and other things as well. But I think that's the primary, like, that's the first thing I like to agree with the person on the other side that there is a problem, but you are not the problem, right? Therefore, we can do something about it, but it's not
Right.
like a personal failure of your body. That's the first big one that I like to go into. Yeah.
And that must be really hard for some women to try and navigate through when they're thinking about, well, how can you say there's nothing wrong with
Hmm.
me, my mindset? You
Yes.
know what I mean? Because we're
Yes.
still trying to think there must be something more. What more can I do? I'm doing everything that I possibly can, but it's not shifting.
Yes.
So that must be a really tough one to work through with your clients sometimes.
Yeah. Something that explain to them is that at any given time, every decision, right? Even as being here, all our listeners listening to us, we only make a decision if deep down we believe that that is going to be more advantageous than disadvantageous, right? So it's
Mm,
basically like at every moment in time, our brain is always trying to get its needs met.
mm,
The problem that happens, let's just call the word quotations on problem, when we're making decisions that we know are either not very healthy for us or we start to and then we fall off the wagon, those things,
mhm.
is that our subconscious needs are winning over the conscious ones, which is I want to lose weight,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But we're always winning, which is the cool part, right? So a lot of my work with mindset is understanding what are those subconscious needs we have, either for protection or for love or for freedom or for something. Because if you become conscious of what is right now unconscious to us, then we can be a little bit more strategic about what when do we actually want to invest time and effort on,
Yeah.
right? And for a lot of people that they want to lose weight, it is because what they actually want is never the number on the scale. I think for all of us, that number is actually irrelevant, right? What we want is what we think we're going to feel and
Yeah.
have and experience when we get there.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that is sort of like what we have to
Yeah.
understand. What are
Yeah.
you actually after? Because
Yeah.
then we can get there, right?
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that that is the transition. That is the point of it's that in between bit that's the unknown. And once we can clarify what it is we actually desire, or we desire to feel, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it makes then the transition, I now have a goal to work towards. This is what actually I'm working towards, not the number on the scale. This.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get it.
And that's what
Um,
just quickly bringing back, Barbara, to the first point we're talking about the change in my beauty standards, right?
mhm,
So if I had to just objectively look at the number on the scale that I aimed for my whole life being Brazilian versus the number, so that number, the healthy number in Canada would not have done the job in Brazil. You know what I mean? Like it's just crazy, but it is a very different goal target because we want to feel a certain way because, the weather, right? We're wearing different outfits and, different body parts get highlighted, all that good stuff. So I think it's just so relative that I much rather work with what you actually want, right? Than to pick some of those more external, even for accountability's sake.
yeah.
If we need a scale to keep us accountable, I think we're actually it's an unsustainable strategy because we're missing the point. Because if
Mm.
deep down you don't want it, it's not going to be sustained long term. It's impossible, right? Because your mind is always going to win on what is most important to you.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that makes so much sense to me. And I didn't think, sometimes we don't think about the impact in different regions, right?
Yes.
Obviously, if you're living in a much warmer climate, you know, being slightly smaller so you can wear more appropriate clothing for
Yes.
the weather, let's put it that way, right?
Yes.
Um, being a certain body size is kind of the expected, right?
Exactly. That's
But I
it.
think that puts
Mhm.
on so much more pressure on an individual to be a certain size as
Yeah.
opposed to feel a certain way and enjoy life because they just love life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Mhm.
and I mean, that's a great segue into this next question that I have when we think about the world in large, about the noise right now everywhere, on Instagram, on social media, in the media itself about exercise and about, losing weight. There are so many, sometimes I am overwhelmed by
Yes.
the choices, right? From Pilates, from wall Pilates, from chair, from yoga, from all sorts of bear yoke Pilates. I don't know what they call it, right? HDT, lifting weights. There are thousands of ways to exercise, right?
Hmm.
Um, what is the best approach, do you think, that we should adopt in respect of understanding what works for an individual to be at their maximum health, emotionally or physically?
Absolutely. And I'll answer this question with like option A and B, right? Because I
Mm,
understand that not everybody is able to go with option A, but I will
yeah.
tell you what option A is first.
Mm,
And that is actually why there are a million diet books, nutrition books, exercise program, because we're all built specifically very differently. And
mm,
we hear this a lot, we're unique, but I mean that in a very scientific sense. And that is why option A is what now has become for a few years now the basis of everything I do, like step one,
mm,
even in the program that you were part of, which
yeah.
is DNA testing,
Yeah.
right? DNA testing in the way that I do from a functional wellness perspective is mapping your body's user manual. So let's just keep with fitness as an example, since that's the one you used, right?
Hmm.
So when we test your genes, we're actually looking at how are you best designed to prevent injury for cardiovascular and resistance training. So
Wow.
using myself as an example, I
Mm,
have learned that I was exercising absolutely wrong from my body. And I was having a lot of knee pain and injuries and a few different not so good benefits that I thought, oh, it's just wear and tear, which I no longer have at all since adjusting what I do and how I do it, right?
Wow.
So for example, some of us are genetically built to be the marathon runners. On the other extreme, some of us are designed for the hit style, type
Yeah.
of exercise,
Yeah.
which I am neither. I'm sort of like in between. Some of us are designed for really light weights, but lots of repetitions,
Hmm.
all the way to the extreme of really heavy weights. So if people with certain genetic profiles are lifting really heavy weights and they have the opposite profile, they can actually gain weight by exercising, gain fat around their muscles by exercising, which shocks people,
Yes,
right?
I am gobsmacked.
So that is why it is complicated for, people just looking everywhere because something will work for everybody, right? But it will never work for everyone. And I think that becomes sort of like really that fork on the road that what I do is, yes, way more specialized, right? Because we
Mm,
test everybody's user manual. So there's a lot more work for me to customize everything.
mm,
But after all this time, serving women in the same age group, right? Like mid 40s to mid to late 60s, with the
mhm.
same goal for most of them, and their protocols are very different. So that tells you something, right? We are indeed built differently. So that's like option A.
Mhm. What is option B then?
Option B. So if say DNA testing is not possible for someone,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And I understand sometimes based on where we live or income brackets, things like that. Option B, like, and this is a little hard to do, but it is possible to do, is to really pause the noise which is out there, right? And actually listen to the body, which is part of that becoming a body's best friend. Because
mm,
like me, like I was like doing hit classes and spinning classes and really
mm,
pushing myself. But then I could barely walk out of the bike one day. That is a clear indication that something is not right, right?
mm,
But because I loved the fitness boost of it, the, endorphins, I was still doing it, even with all the knowledge I have
mm,
before DNA,
mm,
and really listening. Like if you're eating certain foods and you're getting bloated or constipated again, your
mm,
body is telling you something,
mhm,
right? The trick becomes that without DNA testing, then we don't know what are those layers of interference. So sometimes stress and inflammation can really aggravate symptoms. So
mm,
you're not even reacting to the food, you're reacting to whatever because the body's in a state of sort of like chaos. So that's the only trick with option B. Whereas if we know with option A, then we can clear all of the noise right away and then get straight to the point, right? But if it's not possible, then I would suggest, highly encourage people to be very attentive because your
mm.
body's always talking to you
Yes.
on a constant basis, right? And paying attention to that as well, more than just what worked for someone else online. Yeah.
How can people really tune into their bodies? I mean, I know awareness of ourselves, awareness of our emotions, awareness of what's happening in our body. I understand the importance, right? But a lot
Yeah.
of people don't know how to do it. They don't know
Yeah.
how to become aware of what's going on inside. How can they
Yeah.
do it? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. So I usually see two types of people, like if I were to generalize, right?
Hmm.
And I'm the type that I have very quick gut reaction. So if I'm really paying attention, I can know something doesn't feel right if I really ask, right? And I'm gonna give you a funny example, but this is like a true example.
Hmm.
So some time ago, I was at the grocery store with my husband, and we have like an inside joke in the family regarding condensed milk, which,
Okay.
it's a can of sugar,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Dairy and sugar, very popular back home. And I grabbed the can as a joke, and I forget what I said, but I said something to him that I was gonna buy the can, and immediately I was truly joking. And I felt this like my almost like in my gut, and like, no, you're not. And I'm like at the grocery store having this full body reaction to a joke by holding this can of condensed milk. It's like, wow, okay, thanks, buddy. That was a joke, but message received, right? The other type of people will be like my husband, that
Hmm.
he's more like an emotional processor.
Hmm.
So he couldn't in the moment. he could not tell you what he was feeling. He needs to sit with it, process it, and give it at least a good night of sleep. Then he wakes up with clear knowing of what is right and wrong for him.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think it would depend on the type of person we're talking about, right? But if you're like me, that you're the gut instinct type, just being very like aware. And for me, it's like it's almost like it tightens my gut. Like it's not that it's tightening my muscles, but it just feels that there's like pressure there. And
Yes.
that I know is a no for me. Whereas
Mm.
if I feel it's a yes, I just feel like almost like certain in my body. And that's true for emotional decisions, for food decisions, or going somewhere and maybe I'm not supposed to be there at that time
Hmm.
of night or
Hmm.
whatever it is, right? So that's the two types of ways that I feel the body communicates. With the latter, the emotional type of processing being a bit harder, right? Because then you have to distance yourself from the decision,
Hmm.
just sit with it before coming back in. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I like the fact that you're advising people to sometimes you just need to take some time out to allow yourself to process what your body's feeling and determine
Yeah.
what is that really saying to me, as opposed to I might feel slightly anxious or I might feel slightly uncomfortable, but I'm not sure what
Yes.
it is. Therefore, it must mean X, Y, Z, right? Which it
Exactly.
may not necessarily always mean that, but if you give yourself time, and I think some ways that I've suggested to my clients is maybe just sit still, right?
Hmm.
And just meditate
Yeah.
and allow your body to totally become calm so
Hmm.
that you will hear your body speak to you in that moment,
Yeah.
um, which is that still small voice inside your head, which I think is sometimes your subconscious speaking to you, saying,
Yeah.
"Mm-mm, no," or, "Yep, I think you should do this, X, Y, Z," whatever that might be. But I love that.
Yeah.
Um, I know we talked about DNA and you talked about DNA being a way of measuring what your body can deal with in respect of, say, working out weights. How else can DNA help us?
Yes.
I know
So
this is
the
your
way,
topic, so go for it.
yes. So maybe we'll just give you like one quick zoom out and then we go
Yes,
back into
please
here
do.
just briefly
Yeah.
here. Because the way I like to explain DNA is that you were made a half mom, half dad, right? That comes together and gives you your profile, let's just say.
Hmm.
In this profile, I like to think of it, imagine it's like this big book, right? Like the thick, like encyclopedia type, and that is like your user manual. So it's
Hmm.
literally we're testing letters and the A to G, C's, and those letters gets translated by your body into a function, say digestion or inflammation or whatever it is, right? So our job as we're testing DNA is to actually get your profile and see where the typos are. So by
Hmm.
typos, we're actually looking at the areas that you have the potential for the body to translate into maybe more inflammation, worse digestion, or difficulty with this and this and that, so that we know where we need to actually go in there and course correct and influence the DNA so we can turn off those, not so good traits so that you can
Yeah.
have a better
Hmm.
physical outcome. So that's
Hmm.
kind of like what the whole basis of the testing is. Make sense?
Yes, I think it does. Yes.
Because a lot of
Wow.
times people think of DNA and they're like, once I know, what if it's not good, right? And
Mm.
I have lots of red flags. Let's just put it like that in mind when it comes to stress genes, inflammation genes. But by knowing that, it's almost like where are the buttons that life can push on me, so I know what they are. And now we need to know how can we either unpush if the button is pushed, meaning if I have the symptom,
Hmm.
or how can we prevent the button from being pushed in the future if I don't have that symptom, right? So it's kind of looking at the areas in your DNA that you're more susceptible to
Mm.
stress, to inflammation, to life, and preventing that or course correcting it if it had already been pushed on. Yeah,
So,
or turned on.
so in my head, I'm hearing it's more of a psychological testing of ourselves, not the, when I say psychological, I'm sort of thinking about the the mental aspects of us or the emotional aspects of us as opposed to just the um, medical aspects of us, right? So in respect of, we're not just testing whether or not I would get diabetes or cancer or something like that, but we're also testing how our body manages stress and what could be the triggers for stress, how our body manages
Yes.
inflammation and what could be the
Mhm.
triggers and how could we prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
How does food play a part in all of this then?
Yes. And I'll just say one thing quickly to clarify the previous point that
Yeah,
the testing that I do is not your medical sort of genetic
right.
testing, right? We're
Yeah.
not looking for, disease, tendencies, and so on. What we do is exactly what you said, is the body processes and we test various genes in that process. So, for example, if we're looking at stress, sleep, inflammation, all of those areas, fitness, we're actually looking at the various genes in the process of a stress response. So, if there is an issue, we can tell you where the issue is, right? Because a stress gene issue is different for different people. Or if you're looking more at mood and behavior, which we also test for that,
Mhm.
we can tell you if, let's just say, somebody has a lot of difficulty with focus or low mood. We can tell, is this you don't produce enough, you don't transport enough, or don't you bind it enough?
Mm.
Because the way to correct that is completely different based on where the actual problem is.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no blanket solutions. Everybody needs this and that. And we don't put people on vitamins. It's not how this works. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot more targeted. When it comes to food, right, which is what you mentioned, we also
Mhm.
look at all of our genes for our metabolic genes. So that is really important for weight management because we're
Mhm.
looking at appetite regulation. If we have the genes that make us kind of like, I have that one, like always hungry, never full, doesn't matter how much you eat. So a low calorie diet would be terrible for me because I
Yeah.
would never be able to maintain it. We look at your ability, how strong is your metabolism, your
Mm.
ability to burn fat versus just accumulate it. We look at all of those, right? As well as your food genes. So for protein, carbs, and fat, how good are you and how much of each you actually need? Rather than, again, everybody should eat this way. I don't even share what I eat because I don't want to confuse people because the
Mm.
way that I eat is likely not the way you need to eat for your DNA. And that is even true for spouses or family members. It's wonderful when you kind of see and you have certainty. These are the brackets that are most appropriate for my body.
Wow, I love that. It feels like it, but that the DNA that you do feels like a fingerprint, very unique to the
Yes.
individual, right?
Yes.
And no two persons may have the same sort of metabolic makeup. And so what you do, you create uniquely for
Yeah.
that particular person.
Yeah.
So what are you creating? Are you creating like an exercise plan, a meal plan? What are you suggesting to your clients once you've done this
Yeah.
testing? What's next?
So the first thing I do is the big reveal,
Yeah.
which is like the most fun part. And the big reveal is after testing, I create this report that's anywhere from like 50 to 60 pages long.
Wow.
And it's like the book of you, which is cool because differently than a blood work that will change every time you test, your
Mhm.
DNA never changes. So if you test it as a baby versus as an adult or before or after menopause, it doesn't matter because your DNA never changes. It's a
Wow.
one and done
Yeah.
test. So
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
great, right?
Yeah.
But then once you have your book, which like I said is enormous, my job is, and the way that I like to simplify things for people is that I translate that into the top three priorities. So I know your symptoms, I know your goals, and now I know your genetics. So what I do is that in this first session, I tell you a story about this is why you feel this way. This is what is happening, and this is how to fix it. That's basically how I approach. I
Mm.
always go from the highest priority to
Mhm.
And food is what everybody thinks they want, but it's
Mm.
rarely the number one priority. It's like a good supporting system,
Yes,
but
yes.
there's usually a lot bigger things with the stress and inflammation genes, and your neurotransmitters are usually what's causing a lot of the difficulties in staying
Mhm,
on a healthy food
mhm,
plan to start with. So we really start there in the form of supplement protocol, depending on the needs, specific menu plans, and part of the program that you're part of that now has evolved into this very detailed for people that love to know how their
mhm.
bodies work. It
Yes.
actually takes you through an entire DNA report, step by step, so you understand better how to make sense of our big session and specifically how to translate that to help balance blood sugar, reduce inflammation, improve sleep, energy levels. So we go through every single section together through the course materials as well. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot. That's actually a lot more than I had expected you to say or anticipated you saying. So for women who are going through, say, menopause, right? Because that's
hmm
a major
hmm
change in our body. How does this help them? How does it help women who are in their 40s, 50s, as you said, 60s?
Yeah, absolutely. So the major pockets that we look at, because a lot of times, and I'm specifically talking more like North American lifestyle, like it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be different other places. But
Mm-hmm.
most women that I work with come to me with a few commonalities, either in postmenopause or premenopause. And the first one is a very, I would say, complicated lifestyle, a lot of stress, a lot of compromise on sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember the beginning when I was talking about those buttons pushing things, right, which is what we test for, stress and poor sleep are like compounding effects that inflames the body. So inflammation gets triggered, and the combination of high stress, inflammation, and sleep start pushing our DNA in all sorts of ways. So the number one thing I see with menopause transition, it becomes such a stressor in the body that even symptoms that we didn't have before now out of sudden, and we talked about this before, right, becomes a real thing. And sometimes hard to stop because now those genes are on and they're on, right? So for example, I have very, let's say, difficult stress genes and inflammation genes, meaning I create a ton more inflammation than the average person for the same stressor, let alone my stress genes are pushing on that. So
Yeah.
for that transition phase in each postmenopause, what we do first of all is understand how do you code for your hormonal, especially like your estrogen metabolism, which can become quite tricky
Yeah.
for, menopause, as well as your stress, inflammation, and sleep genes. And we clean that up first, remove a lot of that initial interference, and then we work on your actual profile on the genes that need support, fix the food, and so on. So we're just adding a layer that whatever strategies that women are working, even hormonal replacement therapy, whatever it is that people are already doing, we can help them get better results because we're taking a level of interference that you could not remove otherwise unless you know your
Mm.
genes.
Genes. Wow.
Yeah.
That is just, it feels so miraculous. It sounds so miraculous for doing it. And I'm using that word because I know for some women, you know, it feels like they need a miracle. And this is what this feels like, what you're saying. It sounds like here's the
Yeah.
miracle to help you to navigate and manage that phase, that stage of your life.
Yeah. And I think when we know ourselves better, it's almost
Mhm.
like when people come to me, they are already in a place that a lot of symptoms are activated, right? That's usually when there's a
Mhm.
need for what I
Mhm.
do. Like if it's
Mhm.
somebody preventively working, I'm like extra excited. It's like there's so much we can do. But let's just say when people come to me, they're usually at the heightened stage
Mm.
of their symptoms. So we know testing the DNA that we're going to see lots of pockets, right, of complications. However, no different than myself. What is really cool that I think gives women a lot of empowerment is now you know why. There's a reason. This is not in our heads. We're not just, picking things that don't exist. Like there's a reason why, but
Yeah.
there's also a way to fix it,
Yes.
which is no trial and error. We can go straight to the point, right? And I'm not saying every fix is not easy necessarily, right? Like, especially the
Mhm.
deeper, like if somebody, and I work with women like that, that for the last 40, 50 years of their life, their body been inflamed with no ability to relieve, it's going to take some time to clean those cells and retrain the body to go into deep sleep and things like that. But at least to know that's the goal and what to do about it, right? Which I think can be very empowering for people that want to know how their bodies work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you only work with clients here in Ontario, Canada, or do you work
Oh,
with
no.
clients around the world or around Canada?
Around the world, actually, as long as we can ship through FedEx. If your country receives a FedEx shipment, and I know there's some countries, some places that are a little tricky, but as long as FedEx delivers, I can ship you a DNA test kit. Yeah.
Juliana, I mean, I know we've talked about this, but I don't think we've ever talked about this in depth, and this is the first time we've done that. And you have just given me so much insight into what you
Oh.
do and how the DNA process works. Because I was always wondering about it. How do people find you? How do people connect with you?
Yeah, so I think the best place to go to is my website, and we can put it in the show notes, but I'll
Mhm.
give a specific link. So if they go to naturallyjoyous.ca/start here, just one word, that's the best place because in there I have, if you just want information about how it works and how to use it to improve your diet, or if you want to speak with me, everything is organized. This is one page.
Yeah.
It's a good starting point to start the conversation.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
But what's next for you? I mean, you're doing this, you've got the podcast. What's the future like for you and Joyous, Naturally Joyous?
Yes. I think for me, like I know for sure that there's a second book in the radar, probably more 2026, but it has been, coming through me, but I'm really honoring the process.
Yeah.
And, my first book, it was 10 years in the making. So I'm not going to spend 10 for the next one. But it was really a very deep process for me to
Yeah.
even get the first one out.
Yeah.
So that's probably going to be the bigger thing, and really just really focusing on growing awareness for DNA testing. I've been doing a little bit more, work also with couples a little bit. Like it's still a smaller part of it because I primarily service women, but I
Mhm.
have found that, if is a household that the partner is willing, having the buy-in of someone else really has improved the journey for a lot of my clients as well. So just like growing the awareness of DNA testing and what it can do for us while honoring the body as well. Because it's not just about the science, as you know very
Yes,
well, right?
that's
Like
right.
our emotions and our mindset.
Yes,
It's
yes.
really marrying the two sides. That's really what the next book is going to be about anyway. So, yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait for that to come out.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you. Juliana, this has been such an enlightening conversation.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
think that many of our listeners are going to find something here to help them. As we close, what word of advice would you give to women who are going through menopause, premenopause, in perimenopause, in menopause, postmenopause? Because menopause doesn't really go away, right?
Yes.
So I'm learning it doesn't really go away. It stays with us. Um, what word of advice would you give those women? And I know it might be a bit wide because when we're at different phases and stages of this thing called menopause, each
Yeah.
each react to it very differently, right?
Yeah. So I'll frame it this way that I do believe, as I probably said a few times, our bodies are best friend. And I
Mm.
think for a lot of women, menopause can be a beautiful awakening experience to, look at our lives and actually, validate, am I doing the things I love? And that's very much
Mhm.
where your work comes into place.
That's right.
Am I fulfilling my purpose?
Yeah,
Am I in a place in my life that I feel joy?
yeah,
So many of us prioritize other things over feeling good, right?
yeah.
But at the same time, knowing that there is support out there, I know the women's health field is clutter with other stuff, and it's hard sometimes to find support. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm grateful for opportunities like this that I can share one way that I can support women. But if somebody's going through the transition, and yes, it's different for every woman, so it can feel scary and lonely, right? I
Yeah.
do know that. But at the end of the day, what I tell my clients is outlast the temporary and find support. There is support out there. Find a good community, find people like yourself or
Yeah.
myself that
Yeah.
truly dedicate our lives to showing you a better path that is filled with compassion. Like I have a no tough love allowed policy in my life and work. We're tough enough on ourselves. Find a compassionate place that can support you through this transition and outlast a temporary because you will get better.
Love that. I love that. Outlast the temporary and find the support that you need. Thank you, Juliana. It has been an
Oh,
honor and a pleasure having you with me today. All the
oh,
best to
thank
you. And I can't wait
you.
for the new book. Please let me know when the book comes out.
Yes. Thank you so much, Barbara. It has been always wonderful talking to you. And I know you mentioned, but we will put the link to your interview on my podcast on the show notes as well, because it was brilliant.
Yeah,
And I really think the whole messaging of resilience that you shared with us is so crucial for this time. So
definitely.
thank you as well.
You're welcome. Woo! All the best to you. Thank you.
Thanks.